Why do you believe you're qualified to be a Spokane Valley City Council member?
I believe I'm qualified because I have.
Sounds like your mic, we do have to fix your mic, I think. You were right.
Oh, that's what I figured. Thinks we're right. So I believe I will make a good councilman because I have a lot of experience in county government. I was county treasurer for 8 years, and I was a legislator for 2 years. And I think I can bring that to the table because I know all the players, at the county and in the state of Washington too, and how municipal government fits with the other, even federal government. I ran for Congress twice too. So doing that, you try to bone up on a lot of things. I'm a reader, and in fact, I share my books my favorite books with my opponent too. And we talk about libraries, and we think libraries are a good idea. The 10th Amendment says anything not in the federal Constitution belongs to states and the people. I think libraries are good for the public too. But also, I think that I'm good at common cause efforts. So I've worked with people on both sides of the party to get a lot of good things done in my career.
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
Yes, I grew up in the Valley, and I ended up going to Central Valley School District as a student, graduated from Central Valley. Went to Washington State, got my degree in education, and came back to the Valley and taught and worked for the Central Valley School District for 25 years as a teacher, coach, and athletic director. So I dealt with multi-million-dollar budgets, worked with the community. When I retired from there, I was actually approached by the law enforcement museum people to help do research for the history of the Spokane Police Department. So I have an affinity for law enforcement. I then went from there to the library board itself for 10 years. Got a lot more information and knowledge and experience, again, dealing with multi-million-dollar budgets. One of the reasons we have a new library in the Valley was because it took 11 years to get there, but that library was built without a single penny increase in taxes to the taxpayers. It was self-funded. So I'm really proud of that. I know that gives me the experience to continue on and seek another term at this.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, you will go first on this question. Both of you have been elected officials before, but oftentimes when someone is running for local office for the first time, it can be hard to understand what the responsibilities of a city council truly are. In your eyes, what do you believe are the city council's fundamental responsibilities? What sort of issues should the city council avoid getting involved in?
And in deference to the other questions, these have been responded to quite a few times earlier on, and all the things we need to provide have been mentioned. But I think what I want to say from my own perspective is you're working for your community. You're working for all the citizens. It's a nonpartisan situation. I would have not sought this office if it was partisan. There's too many extremes, I believe, on both sides, and there's so many things that are important to the city management, how you run a city, how you provide police protection, how you provide the infrastructure that is needed on a daily basis, and respond to people, such as homelessness and things like that. It takes a lot of teamwork. And actually, in my first 2 years on the council, I was reminded by a reporter that we voted almost over 90% of the time alike throughout our council meetings. It's mostly about budgeting and being good stewards of our budget and managing the services that are provided to our citizens.
Thank you, Tim. Rob, anything you'd like to add?
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry. You have a full minute. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah. When you come to a new position, you're bringing who you are to that position with your experience and whatever wisdom is up there, and that's what people have to look at. I don't know the particularities. I don't know what wiggle room we have at the Valley City Council, but I will learn that, and I will work with my peers on that council too. And you learn pretty quickly what you can do with all the expert witnesses that come up and talking to everybody you can. In fact, today, my neighbor, Maurice Smith, he was in charge of Camp Hope, and he has just written a book about it, and he gave it to me yesterday, and I've already read about 60 pages of it. So, I'm a reader and a researcher, and I can get on board pretty quickly.
Thank you. Tim?
I'd also like to add that probably the most valuable experience and one I've enjoyed the most was with working with the staff. It's amazing what the staff does behind the scenes that isn't in the news, isn't in the paper, people don't talk about in public. And I learned a long time ago from my master teacher was student teaching. Best thing to do is when your students ask you a question, if you don't know the answer, it's okay. You go to the experts that do. I'm not a traffic engineer. I ask the traffic engineer about the road situations and what we need to do. And the entire staff does an excellent job.
Thank you, Tim. Rob, you've got a rebuttal if you'd like to use it.
Well, when I was elected county treasurer, when I ran for county treasurer, I talked to a couple of county commissioners, and I said, well, what does a county treasurer do? They didn't know. You don't know till you're in there. But I did ask, my operations management degree helped me a lot. You're finding efficiencies and shop floor control. And no one had really asked the 30 people that worked there before what they thought about things. So Mike Volz and I formed teams, and we got a lot of problems solved, because we had centuries of experience with those people, and you do it the city too. So it's using the same rationale.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, you are going to go first on this one, and this is a public safety question. With as much specificity as possible, please explain what actions you believe the City Council should take to improve public safety.
Well, one of the big ones that's looming over us now is Measure 1. Do we need a new jail? And when I was county treasurer, I signed the bond issue for the emergency 9/11 measure that had passed. And but a lot of people had questions on it, so I said, can I see the executive summary? Well, there was no executive summary. So I said, well, can you make one up? It should only take a few days to have an executive summary in business and in government. That's one of the things that's necessary for a project. In 8 years, I never got an executive summary. I went to the sheriff, I went to the Board of County Commissioners, I went to the emergency 9/11 people, and I went to the CEO of the county. In 8 years, I didn't get an answer. And I went to the press. The press didn't seem very interested, except for Larry Shook, who, when we started to work on it, he had about a PTSD from Vietnam. So I think that's why I'm against Measure 1 when it comes up. It needs more transparency.
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
Well, one thing we've done very well in public safety is we are going to be adding officers. They're needed. The 2024 budget, we've allowed for that. It's just a matter of how many and where they're going to be slotted, what category, where they're needed. That actually comes up on November 6th. We have a meeting that is open to the public at City Hall. I believe it starts at 1 in the afternoon, and finalizing the contract and meeting with the police department and their needs for the local city police. We also added a officer on the streets, out in the community with our housing and homeless coordinator and his team. We're looking at adding another officer. Since Camp Hope closed, it's getting a little more tenuous out there for our housing and homeless team, because the people that came from Camp Hope, left that area, were the ones that didn't want to leave there anyway, so they're a lot more difficult to deal with. So we're doing whatever we can with the police department to make it easier for them and add additional officers.
Thank you, Tim. Rob?
No, and like Tim, I'll listen to the sheriff. I'll listen to let's see, the police chief Ellis, and all the experts that I can, then make an informed decision.
You have a 30-second rebuttal if you'd like it, Tim.
Oh, no, thank you.
All right. Tim, you're going to be the leader on this one here. Last year, for the 14th year in a row, Spokane Valley opted against a 1% property tax increase. That tax would have cost the typical homeowner about $3.50 and brought the city an additional $131,000 in revenue. Are you in favor of or opposed to taking the 1%?
Well, the first 2 years as on council, I opposed it. This year I voted in favor of it for the main reason of what I just spoke of in the previous question. That would have paid for a police officer. We need more police officers. It would be $3.80 on a homeowner of a $400,000 home, so it's actually going to be less for many. Seniors on fixed income would get a lower rate, as they do on county tax situation. But I think if we start looking at, if we've been saying no for all these years, the hundreds of thousands we're not taking, there's inflation that not only hits our citizens, it hits city services. And if we get too far behind and we are not adding officers, we're not going to be able to catch up.
Thank you, Tim. Rob?
I would vote against it because I'm sure the cities like the county, if you don't use it, it goes into a bank that you could pull it out later. So I thought the best trio of commissioners we had were Phil Harris, Kate McCaslin, and John Roskelley, and they didn't take it for several years. So once we had a recession in 2008, then those commissioners were able to raise it, use 7% that they'd built up over the years to meet the contingencies of that, and also to, the union cooperated, the county unions, and they limited their people to 36 hours a week, and yet they found efficiencies to fill in the rest, so we got through that tough time.
Thank you, Rob. Tim, would you like to use your rebuttal?
And I just want to remind people that I would not support it unless it specifically went to police usage, not to the general fund itself. So it'd be identified for that purpose only.
Rob?
No, I'm fine.
Road question. According to city staff, Spokane Valley's roads are in good shape, but in order to keep them that way, the valley will need to roughly double its annual road maintenance and preservation spending from approximately $8 million a year to $16 million a year. City Council this week agreed to form a transportation benefit district, which could be a precursor to imposing a fee on license plate tabs. The question, and Rob, you can go first, is do you think the city should increase road maintenance spending? And if so, would you support a new tax or fee to come up with the money?
Not on license tabs. That was my very first political involvement. That's when I first met Mike Fagan, and Tim Iman's measure to put that as an initiative. And I went out and gathered signatures. And for me at that time, it's tough to make 12 car payments annually. The license tab tax was like a 13th car payment. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, it was kind of tough to pay that. Plus, it wasn't really used for roads, as I recall. It went to all kinds of different places. So I would, on principle, be against that.
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
Well, I agree with Rob on that. I'd lean toward a sales tax. It's spread out more. There's people that work here and come here on a daily basis from Idaho, for example, and have lunch and whatever, and they spend money here. That'd be 1/10 of the 1% sales tax. Also, the license tabs fee, I agree with. It's hard enough for young families to have no one vehicle, plus get tabs through that, and then look at the option to have another tab fee. So they'd be only paid. Our citizens would be the only one paying it, and our citizens are not the only ones that use our roads. And we, through research, we found that 48% of the sales taxes would be generated from people outside of the city. So I think that's a much more fair way to go.
Thank you, Tim. Rob, anything you'd like to add?
Well, the power to tax is the power to destroy. So you got to make sure if you have to raise a tax, that it's going to be adding value and not waste.
Tim, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'd just like to remind the people that this tax has not changed since 2003. It was on the roads, the initial one. It was a landline tax. And we don't have to ask everybody to raise their hands or anything. I can't see anyway, but about how many people, if you have landlines, do your children and grandchildren. So that's the fee. It just goes down, and we're taking out of reserves. It was mentioned earlier by an individual that we can't continue to do that and maintain the quality of the roads we have, which are very, very good.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, you will go first on this one. To all outward appearances, Spokane Valley has its own police department, but in reality, the Spokane Valley Police Department is part of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. Do you think Spokane Valley should continue its contract with the county, or should the city form its own police department?
We should stay with the county. I believe in local, regional collaboration. They do an excellent job. It has also been pointed out earlier, we're contract with them. We review it every 3 years, or renew it, excuse me. We can ask to circumvent that. We don't have to wait 3 years if there's a situation where we can't work with them, but I don't see any reason why we can't. You look at other large cities, 500,000-600,000 population, they have one police department. And to spend $4 to $7 million, by the way, is what it would cost to start up our own police department. That doesn't count recruiting. That doesn't count, do we want to have our own prosecutor or need one? Do we need to then talk about having our own jail? I think if it works well, we need to stay with it, and it does work very well.
Thank you, Tim. Rob?
Well, I would have to talk to Sheriff Knowles and the people, that are in that. Philosophically, I like decentralization because it supports the principle of subsidiarity. I mean, the best decisions are made as local as possible. And so I would just have to listen to all sides. I know with the contract, we probably have quantities of savings, quantities of scale that are involved too. So you don't want to put any extra burdens on the taxpayers, but also decentralization is something else. So it's one of those things you can see both sides. And as I am there longer and talk to expert people, I'll have a better decision to make.
Thank you, Rob. Tim, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Rob?
No.
This question is about homelessness. The number of homeless people in Spokane County has more than doubled in the last decade, according to the point-in-time count, an annual survey required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Homelessness has increased 36% in the last year alone. In your eyes, what specifically should Spokane Valley be doing to address homelessness? Should the city be spending more local taxpayer dollars on the issue? And Rob, you can go first.
Well, Maurice Smith's book, it's called A Place to Exist. You know, these people have to exist somewhere. I think we do have overflow from the city of Spokane that is sort of encroached upon the valley itself because they did have no place to go. You know, and a lot of it's very, very sad stories. I remember until the 1980s, I never saw anybody in Spokane County with a cardboard sign saying, "Please feed me," or throw me some money. So I think it had a lot to do with cutbacks in mental health, but also fentanyl and the other drugs that are rampant now, and the loss of American values. I'm part of the Spokane Fathered Institute initiative, and we help 90% of the guys in jail had no father figure. So we try to provide advice to these younger men who suddenly what they want to change, stop the generational curse that they're under, and take care of the responsibility for their children, and hopefully get visiting rights or maybe even custody.
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
And I appreciate your comments, Rob. I was at a ribbon cutting last week for a crosswalk. And, actually, it was a groundbreaking for a shelter that's going to open this spring for youth. It is located near SCC. There's a Chaz clinic going to be in the same lot with it, so it's right next to it. Then we had a ribbon cutting across the street for young adults, 18 to 24, for crosswalk. It is a shelter that has 44 beds. And the younger ones, as well as the 18 to 24-year-olds, they're kind of what in the term is the forgotten homeless, because we don't see them. They're not on the street with a shopping cart. And I'm not being facetious by any way when I say that, or a person with mental issues or whatever. Many of them are afraid to go home. They're not secure there. And so it's very important. We work with the state legislature, City of Spokane, Spokane County, and the Valley made this happen. And that's what regional collaboration can do, and it's really needed. We need to address the homeless situation among youth especially, as well as the rest.
Thank you, Tim. Rob?
After I lost my race to Mary Cuney in 2018, I went from a good salary as treasurer to nothing, so I had to get a part-time job. I worked as a security guard for Phoenix, and I worked guarding the Department of Ecology building at Wellesley and Monroe. And I met a lot of the homeless people coming through there. We were there to protect the people from anybody, panhandlers or whoever that were working late. But it was so boring. I talked to everybody that came along unless they were screaming at the air. And had a lot of good stories. I saw a part of life that I'd never seen before, so I'm very sensitive to that.
Thank you, Rob. I think your clock was wrong, if I'm not mistaken. Tim, you have a 30-second rebuttal if you'd like it.
Well, not so much a rebuttal, but just like to add to that. In our zoning in the city of Spokane Valley right now, would not allow large shelters anyway, which no one on the city council supports. I don't think they work. We could have 10 to 15 people in a shelter. We do have properties that we're looking at, and ARPA money, that's federal dollars that were given out during the pandemic for these situations. So we're working with nonprofits to find some areas where we could locate small shelters that are more manageable.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, you can go first on this one. Do you think Spokane Valley should impose term limits on city council members?
I was just talking to some people at the break, and the problem with term, I would not be against term limits if that's what the public would want. The problem we're having in the city of Spokane Valley, and I hope everyone's hearing me sincerely, we want more people to run. I'd like to see more young people get involved. Anytime I talk at a community event or go somewhere in the community, I remind people that, please get involved. It's local government. There's a lot of things going on. It's actually very exciting. And of course, a lot of people, younger people, they're busy with their families. I understand that. And so other people on the council would echo that. And How much would a term limit be? I would start with two terms in my mind if we were to go that route.
Thank you, Tim. Rob?
Well, I'm not dogmatic about it. I'm sensitive to term limits. I've had my idea for a while that each position would have 12 years. You know, contract with America in '94, they were trying to get 3 terms in Congress, 6 years. But I don't think that's really quite enough. But that doesn't mean that you're going to stay out of politics. I think then as you go maybe run for something else, and then you could bring the wisdom you've learned in that to somewhere else. Like I think I can bring my wisdom that I learned at the county and in the legislature to the city of Spokane Valley too. So it all works together, I think. But I think people tend to atrophy in the same office for too long.
Thank you, Rob. Tim, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I agree with the 12 years. Depending on in some terms, are 2 years, as Rob mentioned. You barely get started to figure out what's going on before you're running again. And then you're perpetually running for office in 2-year terms. The city council is 4 years, and so that helps quite a bit. So you can get involved, and then you're not running for 3 more years. And if you want to be paying attention to what's going on and how you're managing things, you don't have to be worried about, hey, I have to go out and run again, and then we'll do with what I'm supposed to do at the city.
Thank you, Tim. Rob, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would like to see 1 6-year term for president. That way you don't have this big commotion every 4 years. And I did keep my term limits pledged, too, as a county treasurer for 2 terms.
Thank you. All right, well, I am out of questions for you, so I'm going to give you your chance for closing statements. I believe that, Rob, you went first, so you're going to go first again on this one, so Tim gets the last word.
Okay, I do want to address one thing came up in a previous debate, and that was Matt Shea. Matt Shea, even Knezovich said Matt Shea had done nothing illegal, even though he described him as a domestic terrorist. And he didn't. In fact, in January 21st of 2021, he was exonerated by the legislative committee that investigated that, but you never saw anything in the newspapers about it. So I defended Matt Shea because he had done nothing illegal. And when the sheriff gave his threats we face dog and pony show, he had my name right underneath Matt Shea's. I've never done anything even close to being a terrorist of any kind in my life, So people get labeled, and I'm all with Jessica to say it's time to stop that. He hasn't been in office for 3 years. Also, we get kind of like, oh, well, you're marginalized, you're extreme, and but how can Matt Shea won substantially each of the 6 times he ran? How can we be extremists if the majority of the valley are for him?
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
Well, I just want to give some updates for the people that they're not aware of what happened in the past 4 years, and I'm excited to run again. We completed an overpass at Barker and Trent. We have fully funded the underpass, which it will be at Pines and Trent, and they'll break ground on that next spring. Next spring. We opened a new library, as I mentioned earlier. We've doubled the park size, the space, and yes, a lot of that won't be developed because it's going to take years before we have the money and need to develop that. But the park space we got on the north bank of the Spokane River at Flora, we were looking at right now adding a world-class cross-country course. We've already been contacted by the NCAA, and if we could have that in place by 2025, they want to stage national events there. It's the least expensive option for that type of sports facility that you can have because we're all going to have a park there, and that'll already be paid for. I've enjoyed the 4 years. It's gone very fast, and I look forward to being on there for 4 more years.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you both very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.